The night before my wedding, my fiancée spent her first night with her first love. I left the engagement ring behind and walked away. Before leaving, I left a message on their social media, wishing you two get back together soon. I'm stepping aside for you. The next second, my fiancée called, "Richard, I just didn't want any regrets in life. Can't you stop being so old-fashioned?" I replied, annoyed, "Now you're not my fiancée, so what does it matter to me?" But she panicked. At her bachelorette party, my fiancée gave her first night to her first love, Paul. I took off the engagement ring and unilaterally announced the wedding was off. When the news reached Laura, she angrily called, "Richard, what drama are you pulling now? If the wedding's off, what am I supposed to do? Do you want everyone to laugh at me? Stop being so petty. I just didn't want any regrets in life. I'm about to marry you. What more do you want?" Her voice was full of blame, as if this was all my fault. But clearly, the one in the wrong was her. I took a deep breath, clenching my fists. I thought she'd try to make me stay when I canceled the wedding, but she started blaming me instead. From age 20 to 27, I'd been chasing her, but in her heart, I meant nothing. She'd always loved Paul. I tried to calm myself down. "Laura, we're breaking up." There was a pause on the other end. Then she remarked disdainfully, "Fine, Richard, so you've got some backbone. Break up. Huh? Sure, I agree. Let's see who else would want you besides me. You're just an unlucky jinx who thinks he's something special." My heart ached, and my breathing quickened. Her words were like a blunt knife slowly cutting at my heart. She knew how to hurt me the most, so she could easily bring me to my knees. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Yeah, I don't deserve you. This jinx is out. We're breaking up, wedding's off." I hung up the phone. A notification from Laura's social media popped up. She was lying on top of Paul, with not a thread on her, her face still flushed. She wrote, "No matter how much time passes, you're the one I always loved but couldn't have. I've finally given myself to you. Now I belong to you." My heart was pierced again. Since Laura and I broke up, she no longer had to sneak around to have a secret relationship with Paul. Laura and I were college mates. She was the beauty of the Chinese department, and I was just a regular guy among the masses, someone everyone avoided. We met at a party where Laura stood up for me when I was bullied. People warned her not to get involved. They called me a jinx, saying my father died from a fall at a construction site when I was little. My mother, who was all I had, passed away 2 years later from overwork. I was sent to live with my aging grandmother, spending a carefree childhood there. But when I turned 10, my grandmother passed away too. From then on, I was sent to an orphanage. There, they all called me the jinx. They said I cursed my family to death, and everyone hated me, bullying me together. The only person who was kind to me, the house mother, passed away from illness shortly after I arrived. Her passing solidified my reputation as the jinx. For the next 8 years, I endured relentless bullying until I met Laura. Like an angel, she brought warmth to my dark life. Even though she was scared herself, she comforted me, "Don't listen to them. None of that's your fault. You deserve everything good the world has to offer." At that moment, I fell for her, hard. Unfortunately, she had a boyfriend, Paul. From then, I started a long journey of unrequited love. In sophomore year, Paul went abroad to study, leading to a big fight between them, ending with a breakup. I seized this chance and pursued her relentlessly. Everyone laughed at me, saying Laura was like the moon in the sky, while I was dirt. How could a jinx like you ever be good enough for Laura? I thought about giving up, but I was defiant. Why should they rob me of the right to pursue happiness? So I chased Laura for 5 years. When she accepted my feelings, I was as happy as a kid. I thought I finally had the right to stand by her side. But when Paul returned, my dreams shattered. Laura's attention drifted back to him. One night, Laura was drunk, muttering Paul's name. That moment felt like someone had crushed my heart. Were my 5 years with her worth less than 1 year with Paul? I started doubting myself, but I kept reassuring myself. Paul was her first love. It's not easy to forget. It wasn't a big deal as long as I was there with her. But when Laura slept with Paul, I could no longer lie to myself. I never thought a girl's virtue depended on such trivial matters. But Laura always claimed to be cold about sex. She would even act disgusted if I accidentally touched her. Yet she could share a bed with Paul and go through with it? When Laura's parents found out the wedding was off, they angrily came to demand an explanation. Both of them immediately started blaming me without a word. Our Laura has been with you for years. We've booked the banquet. Now you say it's off? Are you trying to humiliate us in front of family and friends? Richard, I'm telling you, our Laura marrying you is your good fortune. You better not be ungrateful. I furiously tossed Laura and Paul's photos in front of them. Take a good look at the good deeds your wonderful daughter has done. The day before our wedding, she went and got a room with another guy. I'm Richard, and there's no way I'm putting up with that nonsense. Her parents looked like they'd swallowed something bitter. Laura's mom spoke up. So what? It's just a night, no big deal. Why are you making such a fuss? Her dad chimed in quickly. Yeah, it's been centuries since those old days. Why are you being so old-fashioned? Honestly, I found their comments kind of amusing in a ridiculous way. I just had to see how shameless this family could get. Feigning remorse, I sighed. Auntie, uncle, it's not that I'm fixated on this. I just need time to accept it. Laura's mom scoffed. Why can't you accept it? It's you being overly sensitive. It's an open world now. I couldn't agree more, nodding as I discreetly recorded the conversation. Laura's dad didn't look too happy. If this gets out, it won't be nice for anyone. Don't say we didn't give you a chance. As long as you keep quiet, Laura can still marry you. Struggling to hold my tongue, I said, shouldn't we ask Laura about this? Marriage involves two people. Their faces turned dark. What do you mean? Laura marrying you is a blessing. Don't push your luck. I put on my best heartbroken look and sighed. I want to be with Laura, but Paul's quite well off. I'm worried. The mention of Paul got her parents' eyes gleaming. You mean Paul, the one who was with Laura? I nodded, acting surprised. Didn't Laura tell you about him? With a glance and a cough, her dad said, we knew. If Laura and Paul have feelings and we're together, it's best to call off your wedding. Her mom agreed. Yes, this isn't your concern anymore. Inside, I was ecstatic, but I acted heartbroken. But I really love Laura. Before I could finish, they cut me off. Enough, Laura's not your concern anymore. They left in a hurry. As they walked away, I couldn't help but smile slyly. The show's just beginning. Word got back to Laura, and she stormed into my place, yelling, Richard, are you crazy? You really called off the wedding. You must think you're special. Have you forgotten how you begged for me? And just for this small thing, you're canceling everything? You think you never made mistakes all these years? She started trashing things, furious. I only wanted no regrets. Why are you being old-fashioned? And you told my parents? How can you be so heartless? I watched quietly as she threw her tantrum. The girl who once saved me seemed like a total stranger. For a second, I doubted this was the sweet girl I knew. Or was she possessed? I chuckled at the thought. Crazy, huh? I approached, pulling the pillow from her hands. Enough of this? She seemed startled by my firmness, probably unused to it. I took a breath. Laura, I truly liked you and thought you felt the same. You said you didn't like being touched by others, so I respected your space. But now, you go and sleep with someone else. Am I a fool to you? She looked irritated. I said it was just to avoid regrets. Stop dwelling on it. I sighed, feeling exhausted. You know if that's the truth better than I do. I'm not keeping score, but don't push things to the point of no return. You're just old-fashioned. That hit me hard. To her, spending the night with someone else was no big deal. My hurt feelings seemed insignificant. I suddenly remembered the night she accepted my proposal under the fireworks. She promised to love me. Her eyes only had me in them. But now I'm not the one she loves. Since Paul came back, her heart's somewhere else. As I looked at her, I felt a deep fatigue. I should have known a guy like me wouldn't keep something so beautiful. Laura, we should break up. It's better this way. Let's end this, I'm tired. She laughed coldly. Fine, Richard. Break up it is. And like that, our wedding was off. I focused on work, lost touch with her. Until she and Paul got serious. She called me to a cafe, boasting about her life. I wasn't interested but needed clarity. So we met in a cafe. As I arrived, I spotted Laura decked out in designer labels. Seeing me come over, she gave a smug smile, but I ignored it and sat right across from her. Once I sat down, she casually stirred her coffee with a spoon and said, "Richard, I'm with Paul now. Once I have his baby, I'll be Mrs. Paul." She looked at me with disdain. Feeling regret yet? I didn't care for her smug look. So I asked, "Weren't you the one who said you were frigid? How come you're okay with Paul now? Is it because he's paying you?" Laura's face went pale with anger, and she reached to slap me. But before her hand got close, I caught it firmly. She struggled against my grip, cursing, "Richard, you jerk. Let go of me." I let go of her hand, controlling the urge to hit back. "Just tell me why?" Seeing my expression, Laura suddenly laughed. "Ha! Richard, you're such an idiot. You fell for that clumsy lie. I'm not frigid. I just find you disgusting. Who'd want to be intimate with a jinx?" Angry, I looked at her and then chuckled softly. "A jinx? But weren't you engaged to this jinx? How are you any better?" Hearing that, she slammed her coffee cup down, spilling onto my sleeve. She shot me a disdainful glance. "You thought I was with you because I liked you? Get real. Nobody likes a jinx. Paul wanted me to find someone who liked me. Otherwise, I'd never choose you. You actually thought you could charm me?" With a contemptuous smirk, she added, "You should actually thank Paul. If it weren't for him, you'd never have the honor of being my boyfriend. Honestly, being with you made me sick every day." Her words slowly sunk in, leaving a bitter pain inside me. No wonder she always seemed so unhappy with me. To her, I was just a burden. But why me? She had many admirers, so why me? Laura seemed to catch that confusion in my eyes. "Don't think too much. I picked you because you're needy and dumb." The last hope vanished in my heart. I was completely done. After Laura and I broke up, my buddy Mike, who I started a studio with, joked about celebrating my escape. We were sitting at a street-side barbecue stall, eating skewers and downing beers. After a few drinks, Mike slung an arm around my shoulder. "Congrats on getting out of a toxic relationship." I chuckled with him. "Even you noticed." He rolled his eyes. "Anyone with eyes could. You were just too close to see it." I looked up at the bright moon, Laura's face still in my mind. She used to be so nice. Mike looked up too. People change. We all move on eventually. That night we drank a lot. In my drunken haze, I saw Laura again. She was stunning in a red dress, like fire, beautifully out of reach. She smiled, reaching her hand to me. "Hey, don't listen to them. It wasn't your fault. You deserve all the good things in the world." I tried to reach for her hand, but then she appeared in someone else's arms. Mocking me? Who'd want to be with a jinx? I woke up in a cold sweat, checked the time and messaged Mike. Talked about leaving a city and heading to F City. I'd always planned on moving to F City, but Laura wanted to stay in a city. So I stayed with her. But now, with nothing holding me back, there was no need to stick around a city. Unfortunately, there were some unfinished business ties in a city. It wasn't the right timing. "Richard, we've just got a new project here. It might take another 6 months, Mike said apologetically over the phone. I reassured him with a laugh. "No problem. The project's important. We can move later." So I stayed a while longer in a city. During that time, Laura would send me messages, flaunting her new life. "Richard, did you see? I'm living the high life now. Things you, a jinx, could never afford." I rarely looked at her messages but sometimes peeked. Mike thought I still pined for her and often lectured me. I was non-committal. Don't worry. I'd never put myself in a position to be cheated on. Not long after, Laura announced she was pregnant, gleefully sharing the joy online, hinting she'd marry into wealth. She even messaged me to boast. "Richard, I'm pregnant. Paul said once I safely have the baby, I'm his wife." Jealous? I found her annoying and blocked her on everything. After that, peace returned. 5 months later, I ran into Laura at the mall. She was in a maternity store shopping around. Looking at her from behind, I didn't know how to feel. Maybe I should congratulate her on achieving her goal. As I was leaving, I caught her conversation with a sales rep. They say people change, but the tiredness on her face, that didn't seem to fade. Maybe because of the hormones, her face, which she always took care of, broke out with acne of all sizes. Her belly was slightly sticking out, and she was so thin that she looked like skin and bones. Her figure had completely changed. I was a bit surprised because no matter what, Paul wouldn't just ignore her, right? Why did she look like this and not better with pregnancy? Just when I was puzzled, Paul walked in, looking annoyed. Seeing Paul, Laura immediately put on a pleased smile. She held her belly and eagerly walked over to Paul. "Paul, why are you here?" As she spoke, she tried to hook her arm around Paul's, but he subtly avoided her. Watching this, I couldn't help but find it a bit funny. She went through all those hoops to marry Paul, and now? It's all just self-deception. Laura saw Paul avoid her, so she awkwardly drew her hand back and stood to the side, embarrassed. Paul didn't even want to look at her, and said with a frown, "Didn't I tell you not to come out these days? Can't you understand?" A flash of panic crossed Laura's face. "Paul, I wasn't wandering around." All right, I don't want to hear your explanations. Just come back with me now." Finished speaking, Paul ignored the eyes of others around them and dragged Laura away. Watching them leave, I couldn't help but smile. The show was just getting started. Paul was somehow afraid of Laura appearing in public because his fiancée was coming back. Yes, Paul had a fiancée and she was a real rich girl. Paul needed Wendy to provide funds, so he proposed an arranged marriage. Word is, this spoiled and overbearing rich girl hates for anyone to steal her things. In a couple of days, this spoiled and overbearing lady would be returning to the country. When that happens, there's bound to be more drama. Sure enough, within a few days, all the big financial news outlets were reporting on her return and her marriage contract with Paul. And here I was, packing my bags, planning to leave any time. During this time, Mike had been trying to set me up with his sister. At first, I refused, but as I got to know her, I found out she's actually really nice. Before I knew it, I started liking this sweet and caring girl. I figured once I settled down in City F, I'd make things official with her. Just as I was lost in my happiness, Laura came knocking on my door. When she arrived, Emily and I were getting ready to load the luggage into the car. Seeing me moving stuff, Laura suddenly blocked my path. "Richard, what are you doing?" "Moving," I answered her calmly, but Laura acted like she'd lost her mind, clinging to me. "What gives you the right to move? Where are you going?" "I won't allow you to move." As she clutched onto me, I began feeling inexplicably annoyed and wanted to push her away. But, thinking of the child in her belly, I just stood there. Just as I was at a loss, Emily came over. She frowned at Laura holding my hand, then smiled sweetly at Laura. "Miss, you're holding my boyfriend's hand." Emily's tone was still gentle and poised, but Laura panicked. She looked at me incredulously. "What did she say? She's your girlfriend?" Her eyes filled with anger and heartbreak, as if I was some jerk who abandoned her. "Did I give you permission to have a girlfriend? How dare you find one behind my back? Have you two been sneaking around?" Then she seemed to think of something, and nodded as she stepped back. I thought, how could you bear to break up with me? Turns out there was someone outside all along, no wonder. She raised her bloodshot eyes, staring at me. "You broke up with me just for your mistress, didn't you?" I stepped forward, shielding Emily behind me. "Are you crazy? We already broke up. Me having a girlfriend has nothing to do with you. Also, I met Emily after our breakup. If you keep slandering Emily, don't blame me for being ruthless. Lastly, if you're unwell, go see a doctor. Don't lose it in front of me." As I took Emily's hand to leave, Laura blocked my way again. This time, her look held a bit of pleading. "Please don't go, okay? That rich girl Wendy isn't even human. She wants to kill the baby in my belly. I really have no other choice. I'm begging you. Save me. Okay?" I looked at Laura half amused. "Oh, you want me to save you? What can a loser like me do for you?" Seeing my reaction, Laura started apologizing. "Richard, I was wrong. I'm sorry for what I did before. As long as you help me, I'll do anything you say. Help you? How? Seeing my hesitation, Laura glanced at Emily, then hurriedly said, Simple, just publicly admit that the baby in my belly is yours, and that we're engaged. Before she could finish, I laughed coldly. Laura, you've got quite an imagination. You plan to use me to keep this child, then leverage it for benefits from Paul? Laura stammered, As long as you agree, I'll be good to you. We can be a happy family of 3. Laura, why do you think I'd be stupid enough to wear a green hat for you? And why would I want you, a used piece? Laura, I'm patient, not stupid. Maybe she was shocked by my words, or maybe her last hope was dashed. Laura stood there, dazed, for quite a while without reacting. I took Emily's hand, bypassed Laura, and left. I thought it would all end there, but I underestimated Laura's nerve. To keep the child, she publicly claimed the baby was mine. She posted a sob story on social media, and loads of people who didn't know the truth bombarded my account. They insulted me and even dredged up my past, saying I was a jinx and that anyone I associated with was doomed. Because of all this, people started telling Laura to dump me, calling me a jinx. Laura put on her heartbroken act, saying she'd always wait for me no matter how much I change, just hoping I'd come back. I was amazed by her act. Suddenly, she became the brave and kind single mom, while I was painted as this jerk who abandoned his wife and kid. People even showed up at my doorstep, demanding I give Laura an explanation. But I had already moved out, so they started camping outside my office. Seeing the angry mob downstairs, I called the cops. They arrived quickly and scattered the crowd. Riding this wave, Laura started live streaming and made a ton of cash. I decided it was time to turn the tables. I released a recording of a conversation with Laura's parents. The recording revealed that Laura had been with someone else the night before our wedding, also showing her parents' greedy nature. This revelation shifted public opinion in my favor. Laura freaked out, accusing me of faking the recordings. But not many people believed her, so she got her parents to clear her name. Things were just calming down when I dropped another bombshell. Surveillance footage and recordings from a cafe. In the video, Laura's voice was crystal clear. Richard, she said, I'm Paul's woman now. Once I have his kid, I'll secure my spot as his wife. Did you think I was with you because I liked you? Please, who would like a jinx? You make me sick. Who would want to be with someone like you? This flipped everything upside down. All the hate I got was now aimed at Laura. To prevent more drama, I handed over the recordings and evidence to the police. I filed charges against Laura for defamation and personal attacks. Meanwhile, those accounts that slammed me the hardest got served with legal notices. They all wanted to settle, but I refused. Soon, the police summoned Laura, but being pregnant and having done no real harm, they couldn't do much. They just held her for a few days before letting her go. That was fine by me. I wasn't trying to get her jailed. I just wanted to prove Paul was the father of her baby. For those defamatory accounts, though, they faced account bans, fines, and possibly jail time. Emily was annoyed Laura got off easy, grumbling in front of me, why did she only get a few days? Does being pregnant make her untouchable? I chuckled and tapped her nose. I wasn't trying to put her behind bars. Emily swatted my hand away with a frown. Are you still hung up on her? Is that why you didn't want her jailed? I laughed. What are you talking about? After what she did to me, I'd be crazy to still care about her. Emily giggled at my reply. Things unfolded just as I expected. Once Wendy found out, she was relentless. She pressured Laura to get an abortion. Laura refused, thinking the child in her belly was Paul's prized possession that he'd surely protect. But she overestimated herself. It was just a child, and there were plenty willing to have Paul's baby if needed. If Laura hadn't blown this up right before the families were supposed to join through marriage, things wouldn't have gone this far. Even if Wendy couldn't tolerate her, for the sake of the marriage alliance, they wouldn't have been so harsh. Affairs like these were not uncommon in their circles. The real issue was the timing. It messed up the merger plans. Wendy couldn't allow Paul to have a child with someone else. It would have been a huge embarrassment. And Paul, without securing Wendy's family's wealth, wouldn't jeopardize his relationship for an illegitimate child. So they cut ties with Laura and her child. But Laura wasn't about to just give up her baby. Not only was there some affection from Paul, but if he passed on, the child would inherit a big chunk of both families' assets. Laura made her escape in the dead of night, but Wendy's people caught her before she could leave the city and forced her to terminate the pregnancy. When I heard this, aside from feeling a bit sorry for Laura, I was unfazed. I was busy planning an unforgettable proposal for Emily. Our engagement day coincided with Paul and Wendy's big wedding, broadcast live on every screen in the city. Holding Emily close, I silently vowed that when we got married, I'd give her a grand celebration, making her the happiest bride ever. Lost in thoughts about our future, something caught my eye on the huge screen. A crazed-looking woman, gaunt and wild-eyed, storming towards Wendy on stage. Screaming in rage, she shouted, "Wendy, you witch! You killed my son. I'll make you pay." The wedding went completely haywire in seconds. The bodyguard rushed over to protect Wendy, but it was too late. The fruit knife in Laura's hand was just inches from Wendy. The guests were all stunned. Not a single one stepped in to protect Wendy. Laura aimed the knife straight for Wendy's abdomen. In the nick of time, Paul stepped in front of Wendy. The knife in Laura's hand stabbed Paul. Only when Paul fell did everyone snap out of it. They all rushed towards him. In mere seconds, the grand wedding turned into a crime scene. Calls to 911 and for ambulances filled the air. Laura stood there in a daze, gazing at Paul lying in a pool of blood. The knife fell from her hand, and she babbled incomprehensibly, Why? No, it wasn't supposed to be like this. No, it's not." Wendy snapped out of her shock, pointing at Laura and shouting to the bodyguard, "What are you waiting for? Detain her now. Don't let her escape. Quickly." Then she turned to the media broadcasting the event live. "Turn off the live feed. Right now. If anyone leaks this, don't blame me for what happens." The scene cut off abruptly there. Emily and I sat in silence for a moment, stunned. Emily looked at me, shocked. "Oh my God, that was insane. Thank goodness we're moving. A city is definitely not where I want to be." I gently patted her back. "It's okay. It's all over now." The incident quickly became news. Even with both families trying to keep it quiet, the buzz never died down. The marriage between the two families became the talk of the town. Wendy was furious at home, and she wanted to break off the engagement. But the alliance was very public now, and Paul got hurt saving Wendy. It couldn't be denied, and if the drama escalated, Laura's abortion would surely come out too. Wendy had no choice but to endure it. Word was, Wendy didn't visit Paul once while he was hospitalized. As for Laura, she couldn't escape the charges of attempted murder. Just when everyone thought she was destined for justice, Laura's parents produced a mental health diagnosis. It clearly stated that Laura suffered from bipolar disorder. After police validation, it was deemed genuine, and Laura was released. After that, Emily, Mike, and I moved to F-City and started a new chapter. Emily and I had a beautiful wedding there. Watching Emily walking down the aisle filled me with a satisfaction I'd never known. I thought to myself, Emily and I are going to be so happy together. 2 years later, our daughter was born. She was like a little replica of Emily, except for her temper, which was all me. Mike would come home every day just to cuddle my little girl, acting like he was her real dad. When our daughter turned 3, work led Mike and me to move with Emily and her back to a city. After 5 years away, returning felt like coming back to a different place. While picking out clothes at the mall, I turned and saw Laura's parents. Their faces stiffened. They looked at Emily and our daughter with pure longing, sighed heavily, and muttered, "Poor Laura, unlucky." On the way home, I was lost in thought, and Emily noticed. She asked if something was bothering me. I told her what Laura's parents had said. After Laura had her breakdown, her parents couldn't bear to let her go, so they took care of her themselves. But her condition worsened. Medication stopped working. Her moods were volatile, veering between suicidal thoughts and violent urges. Her parents had no choice but to institutionalize her. Her condition eventually stabilized, but something triggered her, and she became extremely agitated. She kept talking about her deceased child, claiming the child had come for revenge. In a fit of impulse, she strangled a nurse with a stolen rope and jumped from the rooftop. By the time they found her, it was too late. Emily sighed deeply after hearing this. If only she hadn't treated you that way, her life might have been different. Then, something clicked in her mind, and she looked at me with a worried expression. Do you think Wendy had anything to do with Laura's breakdown? I glanced at my wife and reassured her. Whether Wendy had a hand in it doesn't concern us. Let it go. Everyone has their fate. Let's just enjoy our life. As for Laura, she was simply someone who passed through my life.